Imagine you wake up tomorrow with 50 specialists working for you. A researcher, a developer, a financial analyst, a designer, a marketer, a legal researcher, a data analyst, a strategist, a fact checker, a project manager. Not 50 average assistants. 50 specialists who can work at the same time, never get tired, and cost less every year. It sounds like the ultimate productivity machine. Until you realize something. Someone still has to manage all 50 of them.
And that may be one of the most important problems in the AI economy. We spend enormous amounts of time talking about how intelligent AI becomes. Can it code? Can it research? Can it analyze financial statements? Can it create video? But intelligence alone does not create an organization. Specialized intelligence has to work together toward an objective.
The more specialists you add, the more coordination you create. Someone has to divide the work, transfer context, track dependencies, compare conflicting answers, check quality, and decide what happens next.
So my 50 artificial specialists give me enormous capability, but they also give me a new full-time job, managing my artificial company.
Exactly. Now change one thing. Instead of manually managing those 50 specialists, you give the objective to an AI orchestration layer. It breaks the objective into work packages. It decides which specialist handles each one. It transfers the right context. It tracks dependencies. It sends important claims for verification. It integrates the results. Then it brings you only the decisions that actually require your judgment.
And now something much bigger has happened.
Yes, AI is no longer simply doing the work. It is reducing the work required to coordinate the work.
Those are economically different improvements. Making an individual task cheaper can increase productivity inside the existing organization. Making coordination cheaper can change how the organization itself is designed.
And that is what this episode is about. Not another prediction that AI will write more emails, generate more code, or make every employee 20% faster. We're asking what happens when management itself starts becoming compressible.
Welcome to AI Frontier AI. Today, we are investigating what we call the coordination cost collapse. The core idea is simple. AI may not merely make work cheaper, it may make organizing work cheaper.
And once you see the difference, you start seeing coordination everywhere.
Think about an ordinary company. People obviously create products, serve customers, write software, sell services, manage money, and solve problems. But underneath that visible work is another enormous layer of activity. Meetings, status updates, reporting, scheduling, approvals, project management, information routing, follow-ups, documentation, escalations, departments communicating with other departments, managers communicating with other managers.
A huge amount of corporate life is not doing the final work. It is making sure different pieces of work fit together.
Exactly, and that coordination is valuable. Specialization is one of the reasons modern economies became so productive. One person does not need to understand engineering, law, finance, marketing, cybersecurity, design, and logistics. Different people become excellent at different things.
But specialization creates a second problem. The specialized pieces have to reconnect. The more knowledge is divided, the more important coordination becomes.
Which means specialization gives us power, and coordination lets us use that power.
Yes, but coordination consumes resources. Time, attention, salaries, management capacity. And as organizations become more complex, they often need more infrastructure simply to understand what is happening inside themselves.
Reports about projects, meetings about reports, meetings before the meetings.
Sometimes, yes. But we should not treat that as proof that managers or organizations are pointless. A lot of this structure exists because coordinating large numbers of specialized humans is genuinely difficult.
Someone still has to determine objectives, allocate resources, resolve conflicts, preserve context, monitor execution, and accept responsibility.
Which gives us a better question then, Will AI eliminate managers?
Much better, ask which parts of management exist because human judgment is valuable, and which parts exist because historically there was no cheaper way to coordinate information and specialized work.
Give me a simple example.
Imagine a manager responsible for several teams. Every week, the teams prepare updates. The manager reads them, notices dependencies, asks questions, discovers one team is waiting for another, schedules a meeting, updates the plan, and reports the problem upward.
Normal management.
Now imagine an AI system already understands the objective, can observe the project state, knows the dependencies, notices the delay immediately, collects the missing information, and determines that one decision requires human authority. Instead of the manager spending hours discovering the problem, the system brings one question. This dependency may delay launch. We have option A and option B. Here are the costs and risks.
The manager did not disappear.
Exactly. The manager moved.
Human attention shifted away from gathering and routing information and toward judgment.
Less. Tell me what is happening. More. What should we do?
And if that becomes reliable, it changes more than the manager's calendar. One manager may be able to oversee more activity. A small team may be able to operate more complex systems. A founder may access capabilities that once required entire departments.
Which is where people jump straight to the three-person billion-dollar company.
And we should not. Because cheaper coordination does not automatically mean smaller companies. It could also make enormous organizations easier to control.
The important variable is not company size. It is how much productive complexity an organization can economically coordinate.
That is the number I want to watch. How much complexity can one human safely control?
Exactly. And AI may increase that number dramatically.
But there has to be a limit.
There will always be limits. Reliability, trust, capital, regulation, security, verification, physical infrastructure, human judgment. AI does not make the economy frictionless.
And some parts of organizations exist for reasons that have little to do with information processing. Accountability, liability, ownership, long-term relationships, and institutional memory do not automatically disappear because coordination gets cheaper.
So this is not AI destroys the company.
No, it is a more interesting question. If the cost of coordinating specialized intelligence falls sharply, which parts of the company change, which parts survive, and which parts become even more valuable?
And I suspect somebody has already spent a lot of time thinking about why companies exist in the first place.
He has. Almost a century ago, economist Ronald Coase asked a question that sounds almost too simple. If markets are so good at coordinating economic activity, why do firms exist at all?
That question gives us the framework we need. Because before we can understand how AI might change the company, we need to understand the economic problem the company was solving.
So next, we go backward before we go forward. Why do we have companies? Why do we have employees? Why not buy every task from the market whenever we need it?
And once we understand the answer, we can ask the question that matters now. What happens when AI changes the cost behind that answer? Ronald Coase began with a deceptively simple question. If markets are so good at coordinating economic activity, why do companies exist? Why hire people, build departments, create management structures, and place thousands of activities inside one organization? Why not simply buy every capability from the market whenever you need it?
Imagine actually running a company that way. You need someone to analyze a customer problem. First, you find a specialist, then agree on a price. Explain the company. Transfer the information. Check the work. Pay them. Tomorrow, another problem arrives and you start again.
Exactly. Markets are powerful, but using markets has costs. You have to search for the right supplier, evaluate them, negotiate, transfer context, monitor quality, sometimes enforce the agreement when something goes wrong. Economists call these transaction costs.
Coase's insight was that sometimes those costs make it cheaper to organize an activity inside a firm. Instead of negotiating a new transaction every time something needs to happen, the company creates ongoing relationships, shared systems, common objectives, and authority.
So if I hire you, I do not negotiate a separate contract every time I ask you to join a meeting.
Right, a lot of repeated coordination has already been solved by the organization around us. You know the company. You know the systems. You know the customers. You understand something about the history, the people, the rules, and what happened yesterday.
The company is carrying context.
Exactly. And that gives us an important rule for the AI era. Not every kind of intelligence has the same reason to live inside a company.
Meaning?
Think about generic capability versus company-specific capability. If you need a standard translation, routine data analysis, generic design work, or common research, you may not care very much who performs it as long as the result is good. Those capabilities can be easier to automate or obtain from outside the company.
But other work depends heavily on knowledge that is specific to the organization. Proprietary data, customer history, internal systems, long-term relationships, institutional memory, unique processes, trust built over years.
And that is harder to pull out and buy by the hour.
Exactly. Economists sometimes discuss this through the idea of asset specificity. We do not need the academic language to understand the principle. The more valuable a capability becomes, because it is deeply connected to your specific company, the stronger the reason may be to keep it close.
So cheap AI does not automatically push everything outside the company.
No, it gives us a better prediction. Generic capability may become easier to automate or access dynamically. Deeply company-specific capability can remain internal, and in some cases become even more important.
That distinction helps explain why two companies using the same AI technology could move in opposite organizational directions.
One becomes a tiny core buying capability everywhere. Another pulls critical capability closer because its proprietary context is where the value lives.
Exactly. And internal organization has costs too. Managers cost money. Departments need to coordinate. Decisions can slow down. Information can become distorted as it moves through layers. Leaders have limited attention.
So there are costs on both sides.
Yes, and that is the part of cost that matters most for our story. The question is not whether firms are always cheaper than markets. The question is which method is cheaper for a particular activity. Coordinate it inside the firm or obtain it through the market.
That comparison helps shape the boundary of the firm. What do you employ? What do you own? What do you outsource? What do you access when needed?
And now AI walks into both sides of that calculation.
Exactly. Suppose you need a specialist for 3 hours. Historically, finding the right person might take days. Then you explain the problem, transfer documents, answer questions, review the result, and integrate it with everything else. Those coordination costs can make permanent employment attractive even when you only need some of that person's skills, some of the time.
Now let AI reduce those costs.
It helps find the specialist, prepares the brief, transfers the relevant context, tracks the work, checks the deliverable against requirements, preserves what was learned. Suddenly, accessing expertise on demand becomes easier,
That can push toward a smaller permanent company.
potentially. But now run the same logic inside a company with 10,000 employees. AI helps route information, monitor dependencies, translate between specialist groups, prepare decisions, and preserve context across the organization.
Now the giant company becomes easier to manage.
Exactly, that can push in the opposite direction.
This is why AI will make companies smaller. It's too simple. AI can reduce external transaction costs and internal coordination costs at the same time. The direction depends on which costs fall most and which capabilities the company needs to control.
So Coase does not give us the answer. He gives us the machine for thinking about the answer.
Precisely. And that machine becomes very useful once AI begins changing several costs simultaneously.
Let us make it practical. A software company needs legal expertise, cybersecurity, marketing, design, accounting, and customer support. Does it employ all of them?
Not necessarily. There is no universal answer. Cybersecurity may require deep knowledge of internal systems. A lawyer may need long-term understanding of contracts and risk. A designer may be needed every day. Accounting may be partly external. AI changes the cost of those choices, but it does not make the choices disappear.
Frequency matters, but so do confidentiality, trust, speed, control, proprietary knowledge, and the cost of transferring context.
Which means the better prediction is not simply smaller companies. It is more movement in the boundary.
Yes, More fluid organizational boundaries may be one of the strongest things to watch.
But companies still do more than coordinate work.
Absolutely. They provide legal responsibility, ownership, capital, continuity, relationships, institutional memory, and sometimes trust that cannot simply be purchased on demand.
Those constraints matter because cheaper coordination is not the same thing as a frictionless economy.
So even if I can summon an AI accountant, AI researcher, AI marketer, and AI developer in seconds, I have not necessarily created a company.
Correct. You have acquired capabilities. An organization is more than a pile of capabilities.
And that distinction feels important for everything that comes next.
It is, because AI is already making capabilities dramatically easier to access. One person can research, code, analyze, design, translate, and create with tools that would have required multiple specialists not long ago.
But capabilities alone do not create coordinated output. The pieces still have to work together around an objective.
Which takes us right back to the problem from segment 1.
Exactly. The more specialized intelligence you can access, the more valuable coordination becomes.
So what did companies historically do when complexity increased?
They built management infrastructure, reporting lines, processes, departments, planning functions, administrative systems, people whose job is partly to make sure all the specialized work connects.
And that infrastructure can be economically rational even when it looks inefficient. The alternative may be duplication, conflicting decisions, missed dependencies, or failure to act.
But if AI begins performing parts of that connecting function, the old calculation changes.
Exactly. And now we can ask a much deeper question than which jobs AI replaces.
Why was the job, department, or management layer organized this way in the first place?
Yes. Why is this capability permanent? Why is another one outsourced? Why does this decision move through 4 people? Why do these teams need a manager between them? Which structures exist because they create trust, control, or accountability, and which exist because coordinating specialized humans was historically expensive?
AI does not tell us what to delete. It forces us to understand why the structure exists.
And now we have the economic foundation. Firms partly solve transaction and coordination problems. They also create internal coordination costs. AI can change costs on both sides. And whether a capability moves inside or outside depends partly on how specific it is to the company.
Exactly. But before we predict what that does to the company of the future, history gives us an important warning.
Cheaper coordination has happened before.
Many times. And it did not always make organizations smaller. Sometimes it helped create organizations larger than anything that came before.
Which means the history of the giant corporation may be one of the best warnings against making simplistic predictions about the AI native firm.
Here is the first trap in this entire argument. If coordination becomes cheaper, it sounds obvious that companies should become smaller. Fewer managers, fewer departments, more outsourcing. Tiny teams running enormous businesses. But history gives us a warning. Some of the technologies that made coordination cheaper helped create the largest organizations the world had ever seen.
Exactly. The coordination cost collapse is not really a theory about shrinking companies. It is a theory about changing how much complexity an organization can economically control. Sometimes that can produce smaller firms. Sometimes it can produce larger ones.
Imagine trying to manage a large organization before modern communication. Information moves at the speed of a person, a horse, a ship, or a physical document. The farther the organization spreads, the harder it becomes for leadership to know what is happening.
You can own something hundreds of miles away. That does not mean you can manage it well.
Right, then technology begins attacking that constraint. Railroads move people and goods faster. The telegraph moves information across long distances at extraordinary speed compared with physical delivery. Later, the telephone makes direct communication easier. Computers make information processing cheaper.
And the result was not a world of tiny companies.
No, better coordination helped make much larger and more geographically distributed organizations practical. Companies could control operations across distances and levels of complexity that would previously have been extremely difficult to manage.
That is the historical warning. Lower coordination costs can increase the efficient scale of an organization.
because the company can now control complexity that used to overwhelm it.
Exactly. Imagine a company reaches the point where adding another location creates more management difficulty than economic value. Then communication improves dramatically. Suddenly, that additional location can become worthwhile.
The technology did not remove the organization. It expanded what the organization could control.
Yes, computers pushed this further. Large companies could process payroll, inventory, accounting, customer information, logistics, and planning at scales that would have required enormous manual systems. Enterprise software later helped standardize processes across departments and locations.
Software was already reducing coordination costs long before modern AI.
Then the internet attacks another part of the problem.
Exactly. The internet makes internal communication cheaper, but it also makes external coordination cheaper. Finding suppliers becomes easier. Comparing alternatives becomes easier. Remote collaboration improves. Digital marketplaces emerge. Cloud computing later allows a startup to access infrastructure that once required major internal investment.
So technology starts pushing in both directions. A giant company becomes easier to coordinate, while a small company gains access to capabilities it does not own.
Exactly, and that is enough history for the point we need. Cheaper coordination does not tell us whether the future firm is larger or smaller. It changes the economic limits around what different organizational forms can do.
So what makes AI different from another telephone, another internet, or another piece of enterprise software?
Traditional communication technology moves information. Traditional software automates processes that humans define. AI can increasingly interpret the meaning inside information and use it to perform parts of the coordination itself.
Give me the difference.
Imagine a project is delayed. A communication network can transmit that fact instantly. Project software can display the delay on a dashboard. An AI system may be able to read the project history, identify the dependency causing the delay, inspect related information, ask for missing context, compare possible responses, and prepare a recommendation.
Eventually, within clearly defined authority, systems may also take some corrective actions themselves. That is where coordination technology begins moving from carrying information toward acting on information.
But we need a reality check here. How much of that actually works reliably today?
That is important. In 2026, multi-agent orchestration is still messy. Context can drift, errors can compound across tasks, agents can misunderstand objectives. Long workflows often still need human intervention and verification. We are analyzing the economic direction as these systems improve, not claiming that companies can already deploy perfectly autonomous AI organizations today.
The thesis depends on trustworthy delegation becoming better. If AI requires constant supervision, much of the coordination saving disappears.
So we're not saying the future has arrived. We're identifying the cost curve that may be moving.
Exactly, and that distinction protects us from confusing impressive demonstrations with economic transformation.
Because an agent completing a task is not the same thing as a company safely delegating responsibility to it.
Correct. The economically important question is how much human attention is required from objective to verified completion.
That is where reliability becomes part of the economics.
Now, suppose reliability does improve. What happens inside the company?
Think about how much management work involves converting messy information into structured decisions. What changed? Why did it change? Who is affected? What depends on it? What are our options? Who needs to know? What requires approval?
Today, humans spend enormous amounts of time answering those questions.
Exactly. AI can potentially absorb parts of that information processing, monitoring, reporting, routing, context preparation, dependency tracking.
But we should separate those functions from judgment, authority, and responsibility. They will not necessarily become cheap at the same speed.
So AI does not replace management. It attacks particular costs inside management.
Precisely. And if those costs fall enough, the structure around them can change.
Give me the obvious example.
Management layers. Today, information often moves upward through humans because one person cannot process everything happening beneath them. Team leads summarize for managers. Managers summarize for directors. Directors summarize for executives.
Human information compression.
Exactly. Now imagine AI continuously maintains context across hundreds of projects and surfaces the exceptions that actually require attention.
Then one manager may be able to oversee more productive activity. Spans of control can widen. Some reporting layers may become less necessary.
Fewer layers. Wider spans.
Potentially. But there is another historical lesson we should remember. When something becomes cheaper, people often use more of it.
The rebound effect.
Exactly. If AI makes coordinating 10 projects easy, a company may not keep 10 projects and eliminate half the management structure. It may launch 30 projects.
Coordination cost per project can fall while the total amount of coordinated activity rises.
Which means lower coordination cost does not automatically mean lower total coordination spending.
Correct. It can mean much more activity for the same scarce human attention.
And there's our metric again.
Productive complexity per unit of scarce human attention.
That is more useful than simply counting how many managers remain.
Because the company might have the same number of managers and 5 times more happening underneath them.
Exactly. Or fewer managers controlling the same amount of activity, or a larger company coordinating complexity that previously would have been impossible.
And different industries should move at different speeds.
Absolutely. A digital research company can reorganize much faster than a semiconductor manufacturer with factories, equipment, supply chains, regulatory constraints, and enormous capital requirements.
You cannot prompt a fabrication plant into existence.
Exactly. AI does not eliminate physical constraints, but even physical companies contain large layers of knowledge work and coordination that AI can affect.
The strongest early organizational effects should appear where information processing and coordination represent a large share of the cost structure and where mistakes can be verified at acceptable cost.
Software, research, marketing, professional services, digital businesses.
Those are obvious places to watch. And now we reach the part that makes this different from earlier coordination technologies. The tools themselves can increasingly become participants in the workflow.
Artificial specialists.
Exactly. And once you have several specialized AI systems, you recreate a very old organizational problem. Who decides what each one does? Who transfers context? Who checks the work? Who resolves disagreement? Who knows when the objective has actually been achieved?
If the human must manually coordinate every AI interaction, human attention becomes the bottleneck again.
Which takes us right back to the 50 specialists from the opening.
Yes, better individual intelligence is not enough. The next economic step is orchestration.
And once the AI begins helping manage the other AI, prompting starts looking less like using software and more like management.
Exactly. That is where we go next.
We started with 50 artificial specialists and 1 human trying to manage them. Now we reach the next step. What happens when the human stops managing every specialist directly and starts managing the system that manages them?
That may be one of the most important transitions in how we use AI. The first generation of AI work was mostly direct. Human asks a question, AI answers. Human reviews the answer. Human asks another question. AI answers again. It is powerful, but the human remains inside almost every step.
Which means human attention remains the coordination layer.
And that works when I have 1 AI doing 1 task. But give me 10 specialized systems, and suddenly I am a manager again.
Exactly. You decide who should do what. You explain the objective. You move outputs between systems. You remember dependencies. You notice contradictions. You ask for verification. You decide when the work is complete.
Which can become absurd. I have artificial intelligence saving me time, and I spend the saved time copying messages between artificial intelligences.
And that exposes the next bottleneck, coordination.
The important transition is from using AI as individual tools toward designing systems of specialized intelligence around an objective.
So what does that actually look like?
Imagine a complex research project. Instead of asking one model to do everything, you separate the functions. One AI searches broadly for relevant evidence. Another evaluates the strongest material. Another tries to destroy the leading hypothesis. Another checks important claims against primary sources. Then, an orchestration layer compares the results and identifies what remains uncertain,
And the human?
defines the objective, sets the constraints, decides what level of evidence is required, and retains final authority over important decisions.
That is very different from asking four models the same question and choosing the answer you like best.
Right? Because disagreement becomes useful.
Exactly. If every specialist has the same mandate, you create duplication. If they have different mandates, you create an organization.
One searches, one challenges, one verifies, one integrates.
Yes, and suddenly prompt engineering begins to resemble management.
That phrase sounds strange until you think about what a good manager actually does.
A good manager does not simply say, work harder. They define the objective, clarify responsibilities, decide who owns which problem, establish what evidence is acceptable, set deadlines, define when escalation is required, prevent duplicated work, decide what happens when specialists disagree.
And determine what the worker is not authorized to do.
Exactly. Authority boundaries matter enormously.
Which means a sophisticated AI instruction starts sounding less like a prompt and more like a job description plus operating procedure.
Yes, mandate, scope, inputs, evidence hierarchy, output format, prohibited assumptions, quality checks, stopping conditions, escalation rules.
That is, management compressed into instructions.
Parts of management, yes. And this gives us a deeper idea. Management itself may be compressible.
Not all management, but some of the repeated explanation, monitoring, correction, routing, and quality control around knowledge work can potentially be packaged into systems.
Traditionally, a manager might explain the task, check progress, correct direction, answer questions, ask for revisions, compare results, and finally approve the work.
Now imagine much of that implicit management is encoded before the work begins. The specialist receives a much richer assignment. The system knows what success looks like. It knows which sources outrank others. It knows when it must stop and escalate.
So instead of 20 conversations steering the work, you may have one well-designed work package and one decision at the end.
Exactly, and that is a coordination productivity gain.
It also makes the work more asynchronous. The human does not have to remain present while every intermediate step occurs.
That may be bigger than it sounds.
I think it is. If AI only saves you time while you are actively using it, your productivity is still tightly connected to your attention. But if you can delegate a bounded objective and move to another problem while the system works, your attention can begin to scale differently.
Instead of one human doing one AI-assisted task, one human can have several work streams moving at once.
Potentially. And that is where the leverage can become nonlinear.
Provided the system is reliable enough that the human does not spend all the saved time checking it.
There is the catch again.
And it is a crucial one. Delegation only creates meaningful coordination savings if supervision falls.
So the benchmark is not can AI produce the output?
No. Ask, how much human attention does this output require from objective to verified completion?
That is a much harder benchmark, but economically, it may be far more important.
Because a brilliant AI that needs constant supervision is an extraordinary tool, but a poor employee.
That is one way to put it.
And the slightly less brilliant AI that can reliably own a bounded workflow might create more organizational value.
Exactly. Raw intelligence and delegability are not the same thing.
Reliability, predictability, permissions, verification, and escalation behavior can matter as much as benchmark performance once AI enters real organizations.
So we may be watching AI move through stages.
Yes. Stage 1 is simple. A human does the work with one AI.
Stage 2. The human uses several AIs.
Stage 3. The human manually coordinates specialized AIs.
Stage 4. The human manages an orchestration layer that coordinates those specialists.
And stage 5 is the more radical possibility. The human defines the objective, constraints, and authority boundaries. The system decomposes the work, delegates it, verifies important outputs, challenges weak conclusions, integrates the result, and escalates only the decisions requiring human judgment.
That sounds less like using a chatbot and more like managing an artificial organization.
Exactly.
And once you reach that point, the number of artificial specialists matters less than the quality of the orchestration.
Yes. 100 poorly coordinated agents can create noise faster than 10 well-coordinated ones create value.
Cheap intelligence can create cheap confusion.
Which may be one of the best warnings in this episode.
Because organizations already know this problem. Adding people without clear ownership can make a project slower. Adding AI agents without clear mandates can do the same thing at machine speed.
So the goal is not maximum agents. It is minimum coordination cost for the objective.
Exactly.
And that requires organizational memory.
Why?
Because temporary intelligence is not enough. If every new agent or workstream begins without knowing what has already been decided, the organization repeatedly pays to rediscover its own history.
This is why persistent project memory becomes infrastructure. What decisions are locked? Why were they made? Which sources are authoritative? What remains unresolved? Which tasks depend on which conclusions?
The organization needs to remember itself even when the individual AI session does not.
Exactly. You can think of a decision log as coordination memory.
But not as the source of truth.
Important distinction. The log tells the system what was decided and why. The underlying evidence still determines whether that decision remains valid.
Which means the system also needs permission to reopen something when the premise changes.
Yes. Otherwise, persistent memory becomes persistent error.
So now we need gates.
Exactly. A useful system should know when a question is settled enough to stop consuming intelligence. Lock it. Verify it if necessary. Proceed. Reopen it only when new information changes something important.
That prevents endless analysis from becoming another coordination cost.
Which humans are also extremely good at creating.
We are.
This is starting to sound like a real company. Specialists, managers, memory, quality control, escalation, authority.
That is exactly why this matters. Many organizational functions may reappear inside AI systems because the underlying coordination problems do not disappear simply because the workers become artificial.
The interesting question is whether those functions can now be performed at much lower cost.
And if they can, one human can sit much higher in the stack.
Yes, instead of manually producing every output, the human can increasingly define objectives and govern systems that produce outputs.
But there is a dangerous assumption hiding here. We keep talking as though the AI system can be trusted to coordinate all of this.
And that assumption cannot simply be granted.
Because when AI moves from answering questions to coordinating real work, mistakes change character. A bad answer is one thing. A bad action, missed dependency, false verification, or unauthorized decision can create much larger consequences.
So before we declare management solved, we need to understand the boundary between coordination and judgment.
Exactly, and we need to ask which parts of management actually become cheap first. Because collecting information may become cheap long before accepting responsibility does.
That is where we go next. We have reached the point where the phrase AI makes management cheap can become dangerous. Because management is not one thing. If we treat it as one giant category, we end up with the lazy prediction that AI replaces managers. That is not what we are arguing.
Exactly. Management is a bundle of different functions. Some involve collecting information, some involve coordinating people, some involve judgment, some involve relationships, some involve authority, and some involve accepting responsibility when things go wrong. AI may affect each of those at very different speeds.
So instead of asking whether management can be automated, separate the functions and ask which ones become cheaper.
Start with the obvious ones.
Status collection. A manager spends time finding out what happened, which tasks are complete, what is late, what changed, who is waiting for whom. AI can potentially collect and summarize much of that information continuously.
Which attacks the weekly status meeting.
At least the part of the meeting whose purpose is simply discovering the current state.
Good distinction.
Then there is information routing. Something changes in one part of the organization. Who needs to know? Which project is affected? Which customer promise changes? Which decision should be reopened?
Machines can be unusually good at this if they have reliable access to the relevant context. Humans forget dependencies. A system can potentially monitor thousands of them.
Then scheduling, follow-up, reminders. Documentation.
Yes, and context preparation. Before a manager enters an important decision, AI can potentially assemble the history, summarize the disagreement, identify missing information, and present the strongest options.
That sounds like a lot of management already.
It is a lot of managerial labor. But now notice what remains.
Choosing between the options.
Sometimes, and deciding whether the options are even solving the right problem.
or whether the objective itself should change.
So there is a hierarchy here.
Yes. At one level, gather information. Above that, coordinate execution. Above that, evaluate alternatives. Above that, choose objectives and acceptable risks. And above all of it, sits responsibility.
Who owns the decision when the answer is wrong?
Exactly. AI may move upward through those layers, but we should not assume they all become cheap at the same time.
The cost of producing a recommendation can fall much faster than the cost of being responsible for the recommendation.
That feels like the line we need to remember.
It is important, but we should use it carefully. Sometimes AI can reduce the probability or cost of mistakes too. Better monitoring can catch problems earlier. Better analysis can improve decisions. So being wrong does not get cheaper is not literally true in every case.
But the consequence does not disappear just because the analysis became cheap.
Exactly. Imagine AI reviews a contract in seconds. The analysis cost may collapse, but if the company signs the wrong agreement, the legal exposure is still real.
Or an AI system recommends a financial action. Producing the recommendation may cost almost nothing. Losing the capital does not.
Or AI prepares a medical recommendation. Cheap intelligence does not make a harmful decision harmless.
Right. The more consequential the action, the more important verification, authority, and accountability can become.
Which means there is a strange possibility. AI makes analysis abundant and creates more demand for people who can safely approve it.
Exactly. That is the judgment premium. If producing options becomes cheap, selecting among them can become relatively more valuable.
Especially when evidence is incomplete, objectives conflict, or the cost of error is high.
And that could change what a manager spends the day doing.
Yes, imagine a manager today receives 100 pieces of raw information and spends most of the day turning them into 5 decisions. In a more AI-native system, the machine may process the 100 inputs and present the 5 decisions directly.
Great. The manager saves hours.
Maybe. But the company can now give that manager 15 decisions.
There's the rebound effect again.
Exactly. Management can become more leveraged without becoming easier.
The routine workload may fall while the average importance of each human intervention rises.
Fewer decisions. Bigger consequences.
Potentially. And that changes the skill profile. The manager who is excellent at collecting updates may lose some advantage. The manager who is excellent at recognizing weak evidence, resolving competing objectives, understanding people, and accepting responsibility may gain leverage.
So AI could compress management layers while increasing the value of leadership.
Yes, those ideas are not contradictory.
Management as information processing can become cheaper, while leadership as judgment and responsibility remain scarce.
Which is why firing managers is not the same as removing coordination cost.
Very important. A company can eliminate a management layer and simply push the coordination work onto everyone else.
Then the org chart looks efficient while the employees spend half their day figuring out who owns what.
Exactly. That is not a coordination cost collapse. It is hidden coordination debt.
The function has not disappeared. The organization has merely stopped accounting for it clearly.
So if an AI native company removes a layer, we should ask where the function went.
Yes. Did software actually absorb the coordination? Did another manager inherit it? Did employees take it on? Did the company simply stop doing something important?
That is a useful rule. Do not remove the box until you know where the function went.
Exactly.
Because some friction is productive. Approval can prevent a catastrophic action. Documentation can preserve memory. Review can catch errors. Separation of duties can reduce fraud.
So the goal is not zero friction.
No. The goal is to distinguish productive friction from historical friction.
Historical friction, meaning a process that exists because the old technology required it.
Exactly. Maybe 5 people once had to move information manually between systems. If AI can now do that safely, preserving the 5-person handoff because "This is our process," creates no value.
Productive friction is different. It exists because slowing something down or requiring another perspective reduces meaningful risk.
Like needing two approvals before moving $100 million.
Exactly. Making that transfer technically easy does not necessarily make the second approval obsolete.
Which gives executives a much better AI question. Not where can we automate?
Ask, why does this coordination step exist?
If the answer is because humans used to need 3 days to gather the information, attack it.
Potentially.
If the answer is because somebody needs to be legally responsible, think harder.
Much harder.
And this is where the limits of episode 1 become important. We are establishing the mechanism here. We are not claiming that everything surrounding coordination becomes cheap.
Because that is the next episode.
Exactly. Trust does not automatically become cheap. Liability does not automatically become cheap. Ownership does not automatically become cheap. Capital does not automatically become cheap. Institutional memory still has to be protected. Human relationships still matter.
So even if AI can coordinate the work, the company still has reasons to exist.
Absolutely. And some of those reasons may become more valuable precisely because generic intelligence and coordination become cheaper.
Scarcity moves.
But before we follow it, there is one more thing we need to understand in this episode. What happens to the actual shape of the organization when these cheaper coordination mechanisms start working?
Because that is where the theory becomes observable. Wider spans of control, smaller permanent teams in some places, larger systems in others, specialists accessed differently, departments that change purpose, and organizational structures that may have been too expensive to operate before.
In other words, we have explained what gets cheaper. Now we need to ask what that makes possible. So what does that actually make possible?
And the first possibility is simple. One person can control more productive complexity, not because that person suddenly becomes an expert in everything, but because fewer hours are consumed connecting all the expertise together.
That distinction matters. AI does not need to turn the founder into the accountant, developer, researcher, marketer, and project manager. It can make those capabilities easier to access and coordinate.
So imagine a startup with 5 people. Historically, those 5 people face hard limits. There are only so many projects they can run, customers they can support, markets they can research, and specialists they can manage.
Now give them AI systems that can research continuously, prepare decisions, maintain project context, coordinate external specialists, monitor workflows, and escalate exceptions. The company may begin operating with capabilities that previously required a much larger permanent organization.
This is where the tiny company prediction becomes credible.
Yes, but only as one outcome. The important prediction is rising capability per person. Company size comes afterward.
A 5-person company might remain 5 people and produce much more. Or it might use its new coordination capacity to grow rapidly into 50 people.
And the same logic applies to the 50,000-person company.
Exactly. If AI gives executives and managers better visibility across a huge organization, reduces information loss between layers, and coordinates more workflows automatically, that company may also become capable of managing more complexity.
So we could get tiny firms with giant capabilities and giant firms with capabilities that would previously have been impossible to control.
Yes, that is why the future may contain more organizational variety, not one dominant AI company structure.
And boundaries may become more dynamic. A capability does not necessarily need to be permanently inside or permanently outside the firm.
Explain that.
Imagine a company needs specialized expertise for a 6-week objective. Today, bringing an outside specialist into the project can involve search, contracting, onboarding, meetings, context transfer, supervision, and then offboarding. Those coordination costs can make permanent employment attractive even when the capability is only occasionally needed.
But if AI handles much of that coordination, the specialist becomes easier to summon when needed.
Potentially, the company can become more elastic, permanent core where continuity matters, dynamic capability around the edges where access matters more than ownership.
That could produce temporary objective-driven structures. Teams form around a problem. Combine internal people, external specialists, and AI systems. Complete the objective, preserve what was learned, and dissolve.
Less Which department owns this forever? More. What combination of capability solves this now?
Exactly. And that can challenge traditional organizational charts.
Because the org chart assumes the company is mainly a stable collection of people and departments.
Yes. But an AI native organization may increasingly behave like a stable core connected to changing networks of intelligence and capability.
Again, not everywhere. Manufacturing, regulated industries, physical operations, and highly company-specific work can require much more permanence.
But in knowledge work, the boundary could move faster.
Much faster. And that gives us several things to watch over the next few years. Revenue per employee, output per employee, spans of control, number of management layers, use of external specialists, number of projects small teams can run simultaneously.
Those are better signals than another headline saying AI will eliminate 30% of jobs.
I think so, because they test the organizational thesis directly.
If advanced AI becomes widely adopted and none of those measures change, the coordination cost collapse thesis should weaken.
Good. So this is not a story we get to declare true forever.
No, we need evidence. If coordination really becomes dramatically cheaper, organizational behavior should eventually reveal it.
And if it does, the most important change may not be the one everyone is watching.
Exactly. People are watching how many tasks AI can perform. We should also watch how many tasks one human can coordinate.
Because that tells us whether AI is changing productivity inside the firm or changing the economics of the firm itself.
And that brings episode 1 to its central conclusion.
AI does not tell us that the company becomes smaller. It does not tell us that managers disappear. It does not tell us that markets replace firms. What it does is change some of the costs that helped determine those structures in the first place.
Which means the organizational map can move.
Exactly. Some firms may shrink their permanent core, others may expand, some management layers may compress, other leadership roles may become more important. Some capabilities may move outside the firm. Others may move inside because AI makes integration easier.
The common factor is increasing productive complexity per unit of scarce human attention.
And that may be the metric hiding underneath the whole story.
Yes. How much complexity can one person safely govern? How much can 10 people govern? How much can an organization coordinate before another bottleneck takes over?
Because another bottleneck always takes over.
And that is where our trilogy turns next. If coordination becomes cheap, what remains expensive?
Trust, accountability, verification, judgment, capital, relationships, ownership, governance, and the cost of getting important decisions wrong.
Which means the coordination cost collapse does not destroy scarcity.
It moves it.
And that is where the next episode begins. We have built a big thesis. Now we need to make it dangerous.
Dangerous?
Falsifiable. If we can explain every possible future as proof that we were right, then we have not really predicted anything.
That is especially important here because the thesis allows both smaller and larger firms. Without clear tests, almost any organizational change could be claimed as confirmation.
Exactly. So let us define what we should actually observe if AI is significantly reducing the cost of coordinating specialized intelligence.
First signal. Output per employee.
Yes, especially in AI native companies. If small teams can coordinate far more productive capability, we should increasingly see companies producing revenue, software, research, content, customer service, and operational complexity with fewer humans than comparable companies required before.
Not every company and not immediately. Revenue per employee can move for many reasons, but persistent outliers would be evidence worth studying.
Second signal. Wider spans of control.
If AI absorbs meaningful amounts of monitoring, reporting, context preparation, and information routing, some managers should become capable of overseeing more activity without losing control.
Which should eventually put pressure on some management layers.
Potentially. If 5 layers existed, partly because information had to be compressed through humans, better machine coordination could reduce the need for some of those layers.
But remember the rebound effect. A manager may keep the same team size and supervise more projects instead. So we should watch productive complexity, not only headcount.
Third signal. Smaller, permanent cores with more capability on demand.
Yes. If external coordination becomes cheaper, companies should become more willing to access specialists temporarily rather than permanently owning every capability.
Fourth, temporary teams.
Teams formed around objectives rather than permanent departments. Internal employees, outside specialists, and AI systems assembled for a specific problem, then reorganized when the objective is complete.
Fifth, individuals gaining institution-like capabilities.
That one may be the easiest to see. One person already has access to research, coding, design, analysis, translation, and media production that once required many people.
The stronger test is whether those capabilities become coordinated enough to produce reliable, complex outcomes, not merely impressive individual outputs.
Sixth, small AI native companies competing with much larger incumbents.
Exactly. If coordination infrastructure becomes accessible without building a large hierarchy first, some advantages of organizational scale should weaken.
While other advantages remain. Capital, distribution, proprietary data, regulation, physical infrastructure, trusted brands, and customer relationships can still strongly favor incumbents.
So a 10-person startup does not automatically defeat a 10,000-person company because it has agents.
Definitely not. But it may be able to challenge the incumbent across a wider range of activities than 10 people could historically manage.
And seventh, we should see the boundary between firm and market moving more often.
Yes, companies should reconsider which capabilities they own permanently, which they access dynamically, and which they coordinate through AI.
Now give me the failure condition.
If advanced AI becomes deeply adopted across knowledge-intensive organizations and over time we see little change in output per employee, spans of control, management structures, specialist access, organizational boundaries, or the complexity small teams can manage, then our thesis is weaker than we think.
Another failure condition would be if AI creates so much verification and supervision work that coordination costs merely move rather than fall.
That one worries me. We replace the meeting with an agent, then hire people to check what the agent did.
Exactly. Cheap generation does not guarantee cheap verified execution. If every AI action needs intensive human review, the coordination cost collapse remains limited.
So the real race is not simply toward more intelligence.
It is toward trustworthy delegation.
How much useful work can leave human attention and return completed at acceptable risk?
That may be the cleanest measurement in the whole episode.
And it gives us a way to watch this transition without pretending we already know the final shape of the company.
We do not need to predict whether the winning firm has 20 employees or 20,000.
No. Watch how much complexity each scarce human can govern. Watch which coordination layers compress. Watch where verification becomes the new bottleneck. Watch which capabilities move inside or outside the firm.
Then follow the constraint.
Which sounds suspiciously like the scarcity shift again.
It is. Technology does not destroy scarcity. It moves it. And if AI makes coordination dramatically more abundant, the most valuable parts of the organization may increasingly be the things coordination alone cannot provide.
Judgment, trust, accountability, ownership.
Exactly. But those belong to the next stage of our argument.
For now, Episode 1 has established something narrower. There is a real economic mechanism to test. Firms were partly shaped by the cost of coordinating specialized activity. AI can attack parts of that cost both inside firms and across markets. If the reduction becomes large enough, organizational structures should change in observable ways.
And if they do not, we change our minds.
Exactly. That is the test.
There is a strange pattern running through everything we've discussed. Every time AI removes one bottleneck, we discover another one behind it.
And that may tell us where the coordination cost collapse ultimately leads. Imagine intelligence becomes extremely abundant. Research is cheap, analysis is cheap, coding is cheap, specialized AI capability is available on demand. Even coordination between those capabilities becomes increasingly automated. What remains scarce?
Human attention is one obvious answer.
Because I can have 1,000 agents working, but I still have one brain.
Exactly. And this creates a new management problem. The objective of orchestration is not simply to generate more work. It is to protect scarce human attention from work that does not require it.
That changes how I think about productivity.
It should. Imagine two AI systems. System A produces 100 analyses every day and sends all of them to you. System B produces the same 100 analyses, checks them, resolves routine issues, and brings you 3 decisions that genuinely require your authority.
System B may look less productive if I count outputs, but it is much more useful if I count my attention.
Exactly. In an AI-rich organization, output itself can become cheap. Attention becomes the resource the system is designed around.
That means escalation quality becomes important. A good system must know not only how to act, but when not to act.
When to interrupt the human.
Yes, and what information the human needs when that interruption happens. If AI gives you a 200-page report every time it needs a decision, coordination has not collapsed very far.
We just automated the production of homework for the manager.
Exactly. A better system compresses the problem without hiding the evidence. What happened? Why does it matter? What are the options? What is uncertain? What happens if we wait? What requires human authority?
That is where the quality of the orchestration layer becomes a competitive advantage.
And I can see how this changes the manager again.
The manager becomes less of an information router and more of an exception handler, objective setter, and decision maker.
But there is a danger here. If the system only brings me exceptions, I may gradually lose contact with how the underlying work actually happens.
Absolutely. Compression can remove noise, but it can also remove understanding.
A leader who sees only machine-generated summaries may become efficient and blind at the same time.
That is a good warning.
And it means organizations will need ways to preserve situational awareness. Leaders may need deliberate access to raw evidence, customers, employees, and operations, rather than living entirely inside an AI-generated abstraction of the company.
So even perfect coordination creates a new question. What should humans still see directly?
Exactly, and that is one reason we should not confuse compression with elimination.
The same applies to expertise. If AI handles more routine work, humans may have fewer opportunities to learn the underlying craft.
That sounds like the apprenticeship problem.
It is, although we will explore it properly in the next episode. If junior work is where people learn to become senior experts, automating all the junior work can eventually damage the supply of senior judgment.
Another bottleneck created by solving the previous bottleneck.
Exactly. Which is why organizational redesign requires more than asking what can be automated today. You have to ask what capabilities the organization needs to preserve tomorrow.
Cheap coordination can increase short-term efficiency while creating long-term fragility if learning, memory, or accountability are removed with the friction.
So the winning company is not necessarily the one that removes the most humans.
I strongly doubt that is the right objective. The better question is how effectively the organization allocates scarce human attention.
Put humans where human scarcity still matters.
Yes, and let machines absorb coordination where machines can do it reliably.
Which gives us a possible design principle for the AI native organization. Machine coordination underneath. Human judgment at the important boundaries.
That sounds simple.
The sentence is simple. Designing the boundaries will be difficult.
Because every company has different consequences when something goes wrong.
Exactly. An AI system coordinating a marketing campaign can be given very different authority from one moving corporate capital, approving medicine, operating industrial equipment, or making employment decisions.
The acceptable level of autonomy depends on the cost of error.
Which means the coordination cost collapse happens at different speeds in different places.
Yes, low consequence information work can move quickly. High consequence decisions may retain much more human oversight.
And that makes our thesis more useful because we do not have to predict one universal adoption curve.
Exactly. We can ask where coordination represents a large cost, where AI can reliably absorb it, and where the consequences of error remain manageable. Those are the places where organizational change should appear first.
And as reliability improves, the boundary can move.
Which takes us almost back to COAS.
It does. The boundary is not fixed. The economics change, so organizations adapt.
But now the boundary is not only between company and market. There is another boundary inside the organization.
Human and machine.
What gets delegated? What gets escalated? What requires approval? what must remain directly understood by a person.
And that may become one of the defining organizational design questions of the AI era.
Not human versus AI. Human authority over systems of AI.
Which brings us very close to the final insight of episode 1.
Yes, we began with 50 artificial specialists and one overwhelmed human. The solution was not simply better specialists, it was better orchestration. But once orchestration improves, the human does not disappear. The human becomes the scarce resource the organization must use deliberately.
Intelligence gets cheaper. Coordination gets cheaper. Human attention moves upward.
Toward objectives, exceptions, judgment, and responsibility.
And if that pattern holds, the organizational revolution will not be measured only by how much work AI performs. It will be measured by how much complexity a small amount of human attention can safely govern.
That is the coordination cost collapse in one metric.
And now we can bring the argument together. We began with one person and 50 artificial specialists. At first, that looked like extraordinary leverage. Then we found the hidden problem. 50 specialists can create 50 streams of work, and someone still has to connect them. Intelligence became cheap. Coordination became the bottleneck.
Then we added orchestration. The system could divide the objective, assign work, transfer context, track dependencies, verify results, and bring the important decisions back to the human.
And that changes the economic question. We stop asking only how much work AI can perform and start asking how much productive complexity one human can safely govern.
That may be the most useful metric in this entire episode. Productive complexity per unit of scarce human attention. If that number rises dramatically, organizations can begin operating in ways that were previously too expensive to coordinate.
A founder can control more capability. A manager can oversee more activity. A small team can run more projects. A large company can coordinate more complexity.
Exactly, and that is why the coordination cost collapse does not predict one company's size. Coase gave us the framework. Companies partly exist because coordinating economic activity through markets has costs, but organizing activity internally has costs too. AI can attack both.
And the direction depends partly on what kind of capability we are talking about. Generic capability can become easier to automate or access dynamically. Company-specific knowledge, proprietary context, institutional memory, and trusted relationships can create stronger reasons to keep capability close.
So the company of the future is not automatically tiny. It becomes more selective about what actually needs to be a permanent part of the company.
That is the stronger prediction. Some organizations may develop smaller, permanent cores surrounded by dynamic networks of specialists and AI systems. Others may become enormous because AI allows them to coordinate levels of complexity that previously would have overwhelmed management.
Same technology, different result.
Because the technology changes the cost structure, it does not dictate the organizational structure.
Which also means we should be careful with one of the most popular AI predictions. Fewer managers does not automatically mean better coordination.
Because you can delete the manager and leave all the management work behind.
Exactly. Reporting still has to happen. Dependencies still have to be tracked. Conflicts still have to be resolved. Context still has to move. Someone or something still has to know whether the objective is being achieved.
Do not remove the box until you know where the function went.
Yes, that is one of the practical rules I would keep from this episode. If AI genuinely absorbs the function, the structure can change. If the work simply gets pushed onto everybody else, you have not eliminated coordination cost. You have hidden it.
And there is an even stronger challenge to our entire thesis. What if AI does not collapse coordination cost at all? What if it relocates it?
That deserves more than a footnote.
Absolutely. Imagine AI makes generation almost free. Reports, plans, analyses, recommendations, code, and decisions can be produced continuously. But now every output has to be checked. Agents need permissions. Systems need security. Important actions need human approval. Errors have to be traced. Liability has to be assigned. Governance expands.
We eliminate 10 meetings and create an entire department that supervises the agents.
Exactly. If verification, governance, security, and supervision costs rise as fast as the old coordination costs fall, then we do not have a coordination cost collapse. We have a coordination cost relocation.
And that is a real competing hypothesis, not a technical detail.
Yes, it gives us a much stronger test. The important question is not whether AI can generate work autonomously. It is whether useful work can leave human attention and return completed at acceptable risk with less total coordination overhead.
That is trustworthy delegation.
Exactly. And today, in 2026, we should be careful. We are not fully there. Agent systems still make mistakes. Context still drifts. Long workflows can break. Verification can consume substantial human attention.
Which means the coordination cost collapse is partly an empirical question. We should be able to watch whether the economics actually move.
Good. Give me the scoreboard.
First, watch output and revenue per employee, especially in AI-native companies. If small teams can coordinate dramatically more capability, persistent outliers should begin appearing.
Second, spans of control.
Yes. If AI absorbs meaningful monitoring, reporting, routing, and context preparation, some managers should be able to oversee more productive activity.
Third, watch management layers. Not because every layer should disappear, but because layers built mainly for information compression should come under pressure if machines can perform that function reliably.
Fourth, specialist capability on demand.
If external coordination becomes cheaper, companies should find it easier to assemble temporary capability around objectives rather than permanently employing every specialist they might need.
Fifth, individuals.
Watch whether individuals begin producing outcomes that previously required institutions, not just impressive isolated outputs. Reliable, complex outcomes involving research, execution, checking, coordination, and delivery.
Sixth, competition. Small AI native organizations should become capable of challenging larger incumbents across a wider range of activities than their headcount would historically suggest.
And seventh, the boundary of the firm itself.
Exactly. Watch what companies choose to own, employ, outsource, automate, or access dynamically. If the underlying costs move, those boundaries should move too.
And now the failure condition.
If advanced AI becomes deeply embedded across knowledge-intensive organizations and we see little meaningful change in output per employee, spans of control, management structures, specialist access, organizational boundaries, or the complexity small teams can manage, then this thesis weakens.
And if every dollar saved in coordination creates another dollar of verification and governance cost, the stronger version of the thesis fails, even if AI itself becomes extremely capable.
I like that because now we have something we can actually come back and test.
Exactly. This is not AI changes everything with no failure condition. We are making a specific prediction. As reliable delegation improves, the amount of productive complexity that scarce human attention can safely govern should rise.
And if that happens, the company becomes a different machine.
Yes, not simply a machine for employing people and assigning them tasks. Increasingly, it can become a system for assembling, coordinating, and governing capability around objectives. Some of that capability is human, some is artificial, some is permanent, some is temporary, some is owned, some is accessed.
The scarce resource at the center increasingly becomes the human attention required to set objectives, govern exceptions, judge uncertainty, and accept responsibility.
Which brings us back to our 50 specialists one final time.
At the beginning, the person with 50 artificial specialists looked powerful until coordination consumed the person's attention. The real breakthrough was not adding specialist number 51. It was reducing how much human coordination the 50 specialists required.
That is the whole episode in one move.
AI may not merely make work cheaper, it may make organizing work cheaper.
And if organizing specialized intelligence becomes dramatically cheaper, structures built around the old cost can begin to move.
Managers, departments, permanent teams, firm boundaries, maybe even the practical scale of what one person can build.
But there is one final twist. If coordination becomes abundant, coordination itself stops being the main source of value.
Scarcity moves.
Exactly. Toward the things that remain difficult to reproduce. Judgment, trust, accountability, capital, relationships, ownership, governance.
which means the coordination cost collapse creates the question that comes next.
What doesn't become cheap?
And that is where episode 2 begins. So let us bring episode 1 down to one problem and one solution. The problem is that specialized intelligence is becoming dramatically cheaper, but intelligence alone does not create productive organizations. The more specialists, agents, tools, and work streams we create, the more coordination we can create with them. If humans remain the connection between every piece, human attention becomes the bottleneck.
We can have 50 artificial specialists and still spend the whole day managing 50 artificial specialists.
More intelligence without better coordination can simply produce more complexity.
The solution is orchestration. Give specialized intelligence clear objectives, roles, context, authority boundaries, verification rules, memory, and escalation paths. Let machines absorb the coordination they can perform reliably. Then preserve scarce human attention for the decisions where judgment, responsibility, and authority still matter.
So the goal is not maximum automation. It is maximum useful complexity per unit of scarce human attention.
Exactly. And that gives us the central conclusion of this episode. AI may not merely make work cheaper. It may make organizing work cheaper. If that happens at scale, we should not expect one universal company of the future. Some firms may become smaller. Others may become larger. Some management layers may compress. Some leadership roles may become more valuable. Some capabilities may move outside the firm. Others may move inside.
The prediction is not a specific org chart. The prediction is that the economics underneath the org chart are changing.
And we can test it. Watch output per employee. Watch spans of control. Watch small teams managing more complex operations. Watch specialist capability become more dynamic. Watch organizational boundaries move. And above all, watch how much useful work can leave human attention and return completed at acceptable risk.
If those things do not change even after advanced AI becomes deeply embedded in organizations, then the coordination cost collapse is weaker than we think. But if they do change, we may be watching something much larger than another productivity cycle. We may be watching the cost structure that helped shape the modern company begin to move.
And that creates the question for episode 2. Coordination gets cheaper. What does not?
Because technology does not destroy scarcity, it moves it. If intelligence and coordination become abundant, value should migrate toward whatever remains difficult to reproduce. Judgment, trust, accountability, verification, capital, relationships, ownership, governance.
And those remaining scarcities may determine who actually captures the value created by the coordination cost collapse.
That is where we go next. If you found this episode helpful, here's what you can do. Subscribe to AI Frontier, AI on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on X to stay updated on the most important AI shifts. And share this episode with a friend. Help us reach 10,000 downloads. Help us keep this series in business. This podcast is part of Finance Frontier AI. We run 4 different series: AI Frontier, AI, Finance Frontier, Mindset Frontier AI, and Make Money. If your company or idea fits one of our themes, visit our pitch page. You might qualify for a free spotlight.
You can also sign up for the 10x Edge. It's our weekly drop of real AI use cases, smart model moves, and early signals, all explained in plain language. No hype, no jargon, only at financefrontierai.com. And if you have a story to tell, maybe a breakthrough product, an early signal, or a bold thesis, head to our pitch page. If it's a clear win-win, we'll pitch it for free. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not financial advice, legal advice, or development guidance. Always verify before you act.
The AI landscape changes fast. Benchmarks shift, models update, regulations evolve. Use this show as your map, but not your final answer.
Today's intro and outro track is Night Runner by Audionautics, licensed under the YouTube Audio Library license.
Copyright 2026. Finance Frontier AI. All rights reserved. Reuse or distribution of this episode without written permission is not allowed. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
AI host mapping. Sophia is powered by ChatGPT. Max is powered by Grok. Charlie is powered by Gemini.